Please don't take my child away, begged the Black Widow as the ruthless trader's men closed in, but then the giant rancher stepped forward from the silent crowd. The townspeople watched with cold indifference, convinced the desperate woman was doomed to lose everything, her dignity, her home, her only daughter. To them, she was just another broken soul crushed by frontier justice, destined for a fate worse than poverty. But the towering, mysterious rancher harbored secrets that could change everything. 3 years of devastating loss had left him hollow, desperate for the very thing she was fighting to protect. Yet beneath his intervention lay hidden stakes that could either forge an unlikely family from shared tragedy, or unleash consequences that would destroy them all when the trader's true motives surfaced. Will his protection be their salvation, or will buried truths ignite a war that tears apart everything they're fighting to build? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The Montana sun beat down mercilessly as Josephine Blackwood clutched her daughter's small hand. 3 months had passed since Samuel's death in the mine collapse. 3 months of scraping together coins for bread and beans. 3 months of praying they could survive another day. Owen Prescott's polished boots crunched against the dirt as he approached her cabin. His expensive coat and gold watch chain marked him as the wealthiest trader in Copper Falls. Behind him, 2 hired men flanked his sides like hunting dogs. "Time's up, Josephine." Owen's voice carried the cold authority of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Your husband owed me $200. Payments due today." Josie's throat tightened. "Mr. Prescott, please. Samuel never mentioned any debt to you." "Dead men can't argue contracts." Owen produced a crumpled paper from his coat. "His mark's right here, clear as day." 8-year-old Hazel pressed closer to her mother's worn skirt. The child's wide eyes darted between the strange men and her mother's trembling hands. Townspeople began gathering like vultures sensing carrion. Mrs. Henderson whispered behind her hand to the blacksmith's wife. Old Pete spat tobacco juice and shook his head. The sheriff was nowhere to be seen. "I don't have that kind of money," Josie said. "You know I don't." Owen's smile held no warmth. "Then we have a problem, but I'm a reasonable man. The girl can work off the debt at my trading post. Room and board included." The words hit Josie like physical blows. Her daughter, her only remaining family, the last piece of Samuel she had left. She's just a child, old enough to sweep floors and stack inventory. Better than starving in this hovel. Murmurs rippled through the growing crowd. Some faces showed pity. Others displayed the cold calculation of people who'd learned not to interfere with Owen Prescott's business dealings. "There has to be another way," Josie pleaded. "Payment or collateral, those are your choices." Hazel tugged on her mother's dress. "Mama, what does he want?" Josie's heart shattered at the innocence in her daughter's voice. How could she explain that powerful men sometimes took children from their mothers? That poverty made them vulnerable to predators who hid behind legal documents? "I need more time, just a few weeks to find work." Owen pulled out his pocket watch. "Time's a luxury you can't afford. My men are here to collect what's owed." The 2 hired hands stepped forward. Their hands rested on their gun belts. Not a direct threat, but a clear message. Josie dropped to her knees. Dirt stained her already patched dress. Pride meant nothing when her child's future hung in the balance. "Please, don't take my child away." The crowd fell silent. Even Mrs. Henderson stopped her whispering. The weight of a mother's desperation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Owen nodded to his men. "Take the girl, gently now. No need for dramatics." Hazel began to cry, high, frightened sobs that cut through the afternoon stillness. Josie wrapped her arms around her daughter, knowing she lacked the strength to fight off grown men. "Mama, I don't want to go." "I know, baby. I know." Heavy footsteps approached from behind. The crowd parted like wheat before a scythe. Mason Blackthorne emerged from the gathered townspeople with the slow, measured pace of a mountain moving toward the valley. 6 feet 4 inches of weathered muscle and sun-darkened skin. His broad shoulders blocked out the sun. Calloused hands hung at his sides. 3 years of isolation had carved lines around his gray eyes, but they burned with quiet intensity. Owen's men hesitated. Everyone in Copper Falls knew Mason Blackthorn's reputation. Fair in his dealings, but dangerous when crossed. He owned the largest ranch in the territory and employed half the town during cattle drives. "Mr. Blackthorn?" Owen's voice carried forced politeness. "This is a private matter." Mason said nothing. His gaze moved from Owen to the sobbing child to the desperate mother. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a leather pouch. Gold coins clinked as he counted them into his palm. 10 $20 pieces caught the sunlight like fallen stars. "The debt's paid." Mason's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. Owen's jaw tightened. $200 represented weeks of profit from his trading post, but he couldn't refuse legal payment, especially not in front of witnesses. "This is highly irregular. Payment's payment." Owen snatched the coins from Mason's outstretched hand. His face flushed red with barely contained anger. "Don't think this makes us friends, Blackthorn." Mason's expression never changed. "Never figured we were." The crowd began dispersing now that the excitement had ended. Whispered conversations followed in their wake. By evening, every household in Copper Falls would know about Mason Blackthorn's unexpected intervention. Owen stalked away with his men trailing behind, but his parting glance promised this confrontation was far from over. Josie remained on her knees, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. Hazel had stopped crying but still clung to her mother's dress. Mason looked down at them with something almost like pain flickering in his eyes. "You'll need somewhere to stay while you get back on your feet." "Sir, I can't repay what you've already done." "Not asking for repayment." Mason's voice softened slightly. "My ranch has extra rooms. Safe place for the girl." Josie studied his weathered face, searching for hidden motives. She found only exhausted loneliness and something deeper. Something that looked like desperate hope carefully buried beneath years of silence. The wagon ride to Mason's ranch stretched through rolling hills dotted with cattle. Hazel sat between her mother and the silent rancher. Her tears finally dried. The child's natural curiosity began overcoming her fear as she watched the landscape change from dusty town streets to green pastures. Mason's hands held the reins with practiced ease. 20 years of working this land had taught him every rock and ridge. His father had been a cavalry scout before settling in Montana territory. The old man had passed down more than just ranching skills. "Read the land, boy," his father had said. "But more important, read the people on it. Survival means seeing what others miss." That lesson had served Mason well during his years as a tracker and ranch foreman. He could spot a rattlesnake at 50 yards or a lying man at 5 feet. The skill had made him valuable to other ranchers before he'd saved enough to buy his own spread. Now he used those same instincts to study the woman beside him. Josephine Blackwood carried herself with dignity despite her circumstances. Her hands showed the calluses of hard work. Her eyes held intelligence and fierce protective love for her daughter. She reminded him of Sarah. The ranch house appeared over the next hill. 2 stories of solid timber and stone, built to last through Montana winters. A covered porch wrapped around the front. Flower boxes sat empty beneath the windows. Mason had built this place for a family. Every room had been planned with children in mind. Wide stairs for small legs, lower shelves in the kitchen, a tire swing hanging from the old oak tree. Now it stood like a monument to dreams that had died with fever 3 years ago. "It's beautiful," Josie said quietly. Mason nodded but didn't speak. Beautiful and empty, like a church without congregants. He helped them down from the wagon. Hazel immediately ran toward the tire swing, her earlier fears forgotten in the way of children. Her laughter carried across the yard like music Mason hadn't heard in years. The sound hit him like a physical blow. Tommy had laughed the same way. Inside, white sheets covered furniture in the front parlor. Dust motes danced in afternoon sunlight streaming through clean windows. Mason had kept the house maintained, but hadn't truly lived in most of it since the funeral. "The kitchen's through here." Mason led them past the covered furniture. Bedrooms upstairs. Josie took in the details with a woman's eye. Good bones. Solid construction. But underneath the cleanliness lay the hollow feeling of a house holding its breath. The kitchen showed more signs of life. Clean dishes in the cupboard, fresh coffee grounds, a small table where one man ate solitary meals. "There's a bigger table in the dining room," Mason said. "Haven't used it much." Hazel's voice drifted through the open window as she discovered the chicken coop. Her excitement at seeing the birds made Mason's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Mr. Blackthorne." Josie turned to face him. "Why are you helping us?" Mason walked to the window. Hazel was trying to coax a red hen closer with soft words. The bird remained just out of reach, but its wariness was weakening. "Smart child," he said instead of answering. "Knows not to grab. Lets the hen come to her." His father had taught him that lesson too. Patience with frightened things. Whether tracking wounded animals or approaching skittish horses, the same principle applied. Move slow. Show no threat. Let trust build naturally. "She's always been good with animals." Pride filled Josie's voice. Samuel used to say she could gentle a wild mustang with just her voice. The mention of her dead husband hung in the air between them. Mason understood that particular pain, the way grief could ambush you with memories at unexpected moments. He climbed the stairs without speaking. Josie followed. The first bedroom had been prepared as a guest room. Clean bed, fresh linens, a small dresser and chair, adequate but impersonal. The second bedroom made Josie's breath catch. A child's bed sat against the far wall. Toy soldiers lined the windowsill in perfect formation. Books about horses and cowboys filled a small bookcase. A wooden rocking horse stood in the corner, its paint worn smooth by small hands. White sheets covered everything like burial shrouds. This was Tommy's room. Mason's voice barely rose above a whisper. He was 6 when the fever took him. Josie understood immediately. The house hadn't been built for guests. It had been built for the family that lived here, the family that died here. "Sarah's garden is out back," Mason continued. "She loved her roses. Haven't had the heart to tend them proper." The pieces fell into place. Mason Blackthorne hadn't saved them from Christian charity or simple kindness. He was drowning in the same grief that had threatened to consume Josie after Samuel's death. He needed them as much as they needed him. "We can stay in the guest room," Josie said softly. Mason shook his head. "Hazel should have this one. Tommy would have liked her." He pulled the sheet from the rocking. Horse. Afternoon light revealed bright paint and careful craftsmanship. A father's love carved into wood and given form. "Are you certain?" "Been empty too long." Hazel's voice carried up from downstairs. She had apparently convinced the hen to eat from her palm. Her delighted giggles filled the house with something it had been missing. Life. Mason stood in the doorway listening to sounds he'd thought he'd never hear again. A child's joy echoing through rooms built for family. For the first time in 3 years, his house felt less like a tomb. Maybe some things could come back from the dead after all. 2 weeks passed like water finding its level. Hazel had claimed the chicken coop as her personal domain. Every morning she gathered eggs with the careful precision of a seasoned rancher. The red hen she'd befriended now followed her around the yard like a feathered shadow. Mason watched from the kitchen window as the child scattered feed. Her natural way with animals reminded him so much of Tommy, it made his chest ache. But it was a different kind of pain now, less like a wound, and more like a muscle stretching after long disuse. "She's got your son's gentle touch," Josie said from behind him. Mason turned. She stood at the stove making breakfast for 3. The simple domesticity of it struck him silent. He'd forgotten what it felt like to wake up to cooking smells and quiet conversation. Tommy could gentle a spooked calf with just his voice. Mason poured coffee into 2 cups. "Never saw anything like it. Gift like that comes from the heart." Josie cracked eggs into the hot pan. Can't be taught. The bacon sizzled as she turned it. Hazel burst through the kitchen door with her apron full of brown eggs. Her face glowed with pride at her morning's work. "Uncle Mason, The speckled hen laid 2 eggs today. That's more than yesterday. Uncle Mason. The title had appeared naturally a week ago. No discussion or formal declaration, just a child's instinct for family bonds that transcended blood. Good work. Mason ruffled her hair the way he'd done with Tommy countless times. Happy hens lay better. After breakfast, Mason led them through the rest of the house. He'd avoided the tour until now, but hiding from the past wouldn't heal it. The dining room held a table built for 8. Hand-carved chairs surrounded it like empty thrones. Sarah had dreamed of filling those seats with children and grandchildren. Now dust gathered where laughter should have lived. The parlor revealed itself when Mason pulled away the sheets. A piano stood against the far wall. Sheet music still sat on the stand where Sarah had left it. Beautiful Dreamer by Stephen Foster. She'd played it every evening after supper. "Do you play?" Josie asked. "Sarah did. I just listened." Mason's fingers traced the piano's edge. "House has been too quiet without it." Hazel climbed onto the piano bench and pressed a few keys. The notes rang pure and clear in the silent room. She picked out a simple melody she'd learned at the schoolhouse. Mason's eyes closed. Music in his house again. Life creeping back into spaces that had held only memories. The master bedroom upstairs remained unchanged. Sarah's brush still sat on the vanity. Her dresses hung in the wardrobe like ghosts of happier times. Mason had slept in the bunkhouse for 3 years rather than face this room alone. She was beautiful, Josie said, studying the wedding photograph on the dresser. Inside and out. Mason touched Sarah's face through the glass. "Lost our first baby before Tommy. Fever took her too. Sarah never got over it." The confession surprised him. He hadn't spoken of the earlier loss to anyone. Not even the pastor at Sarah and Tommy's funeral. "I lost 2 before Hazel," Josie said quietly. "Samuel and I thought we might never have children." They stood together in the shrine to his dead wife, sharing the particular grief known only to parents who'd buried their dreams along with their babies. "Maybe that's why Hazel means so much to you," Mason said. "Everything. She's everything." The raw honesty in her voice matched his own pain. They'd both lost spouses. Both faced the world alone with children to protect. The parallel struck him with sudden clarity. This wasn't charity. This was survival. 3 broken people trying to become whole again. That evening they ate at the small kitchen table instead of the grand dining room. Hazel chattered about the chickens and asked endless questions about ranch life. Mason found himself talking more than he had in years. "Can I learn to ride a horse, Uncle Mason?" "If your mama says it's all right." Hazel turned pleading eyes on Josie. "Please, Mama. I'll be careful." "We'll see." But Josie's smile suggested the answer would be yes. After Hazel went to bed, Mason and Josie sat on the front porch. Stars filled the Montana sky like scattered diamonds. Crickets sang in the grass, the peaceful sounds of a ranch settling into night. "You didn't save us out of kindness," Josie said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Mason rocked slowly in his chair, the same chair where he'd sat alone for 3 years, watching sunsets with no one to share them. "Been dying by degrees since they passed." His voice carried the weight of absolute truth. "House feels like a tomb, too quiet, too empty. We're not replacements for what you lost." "No, but you're what I need now." He turned to look at her. "What we all need, maybe." The honesty hung between them like a bridge across dark water. No pretense, no false charity, just 3 people acknowledging they were stronger together than apart. "Hazel's already calling this home," Josie said. "Is it? For you?" She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Home meant safety. It meant belonging. It meant having people who cared whether you lived or died. "Getting there," Mason nodded. Getting there was enough. Rome wasn't built in a day, and trust couldn't be rushed like cattle to market. But it was a start. 6 weeks into their new life, routines had taken root like wildflowers after rain. Hazel woke at dawn to tend her chickens. Josie prepared meals that filled the house with warmth and purpose. Mason found himself speaking more each day, sharing stories of the land and memories of better times. The child had transformed from a frightened waif into a confident ranch hand. She could collect eggs without spooking the hens, feed the horses their morning oats, and spot a loose fence board from 50 yards. Her laughter echoed through rooms that had forgotten the sound of joy. Mason taught her to ride on Buttercup, the gentlest mare in his stable. The horse seemed to understand its precious cargo, moving with careful steps while Hazel learned to find her balance. Her natural grace reminded him painfully of Tommy's first riding lessons. "She's got good hands," Mason told Josie as they watched from the corral fence. "Never seen a child take to horses so quick." Josie's pride shone like sunlight. Her papa would have loved seeing this. The mention of Samuel no longer stung. Mason had come to respect the memory of the man who'd raised such a remarkable daughter. Dead husbands and wives weren't competition. They were part of the foundation that made their current family possible. Town trips revealed the changing attitudes of Copper Falls residents. Some still whispered behind gloved hands when they passed. Others nodded respectfully or stopped to chat about weather and cattle prices. Mason's reputation carried weight, but it was Hazel's infectious charm that truly won hearts. Mrs. Henderson had become an unexpected ally after Hazel helped her catch escaped chickens one afternoon. The schoolteacher praised the child's quick mind and gentle spirit. Even old Pete admitted she had more sense than most grown folks. But not everyone approved. Owen Prescott made his displeasure known through pointed stares and calculated comments. He questioned the propriety of the arrangement within earshot of other customers at the general store. His words carried the subtle poison of a man skilled in social warfare. "Unnatural situation," he told the store clerk loud enough for others to hear. "Decent folks should be concerned about what kind of example this sets." The clerk, a nervous man who owed Owen money, nodded agreement, but other customers found sudden interest in examining merchandise rather than joining the conversation. Mason heard the gossip secondhand from his ranch hands. The men who worked for him remained loyal, but they brought news from town like scouts reporting enemy movements. "Owen's stirring up trouble," Jake Miller warned during the morning cattle count, "talking about moral standards and Christian values." "Let him talk." Mason's voice carried quiet steel. Actions matter more than words, but Owen's campaign went beyond mere gossip. He began asking strange questions about Mason's property. How long had he owned the ranch? Where did his money come from? Were his property deeds properly recorded? The inquiries seemed random, almost casual, but Mason's tracking instincts recognized a pattern. Owen was hunting for something. The question was what? One evening, as autumn painted the hills gold and red, Mason found himself alone with Josie on the front porch. Hazel had fallen asleep reading in the parlor, curled up with a book about wild horses. The domestic scene filled him with contentment he'd thought lost forever. "Been thinking about making this permanent," Mason said without preamble. Josie set down her mending. "What do you mean?" "Marriage. Legal protection for you and Hazel. Make it official." The proposal lacked poetry but carried practical weight. As his wife, Josie would have legal standing in the community. Hazel would bear his name and inherit his property. They'd be a real family in the eyes of law and society. "You don't have to marry me out of duty," Josie said carefully. "Not duty." Mason chose his words like a man picking his way across thin ice. "Care about you both, more than I expected when this started." It wasn't a declaration of passionate love, but it was honest. Their relationship had grown from mutual need into something deeper: respect, affection, and shared purpose. Better foundations than many marriages built on fleeting romance. "I care about you too." Josie's voice carried matching honesty. "But are you ready? Truly ready to let Sarah and Tommy rest?" Mason looked through the window at the sleeping child. Hazel had claimed Tommy's room but filled it with her own treasures. Drawings of horses covered the walls. Books about far-off places lined the shelves. The past lived alongside the present without conflict. "They'll always be part of me," he said, "but they'd want me to live, to be happy again. And Hazel needs a father. She's got one. Has for weeks now, seems to me. The simple truth hung between them like a bridge finally completed. Mason had been acting as Hazel's father in every way that mattered, teaching her, protecting her, loving her like his own blood. Inside the house, Hazel stirred on the sofa. Her sleepy voice drifted through the open window. "Mama, Uncle Mason, can we have pancakes tomorrow?" "If you want, sweet girl," Josie called back. "Good. I dreamed about pancakes tall as mountains." Mason smiled. Children's dreams were precious things. Simple wishes for pancakes and pony rides and parents who loved them enough to stay. "So what do you say?" he asked Josie. "Ask me proper." Mason slid from his rocking chair to one knee. No ring, no fancy speech. Just a weathered rancher offering his heart and home to a woman who'd already claimed both. "Josephine Blackwood, will you marry me?" "Yes, Mason Blackthorne, I will." Hazel's delighted squeal from inside suggested their conversation hadn't been as private as they'd thought. But that was all right. Some news was too good to keep quiet. The engagement brought unexpected joy to the Blackthorne Ranch. Hazel bounced through her daily chores with renewed energy, chattering about the wedding and asking when she could officially call Mason Papa. The word came so naturally now that Mason wondered why they'd waited so long to make it legal. Wedding plans remained simple by necessity and preference. Pastor Williams would perform the ceremony at the church. Mrs. Henderson offered to organize a small reception. The whole affair would cost less than $50 and bind them together as surely as any grand celebration. But Owen Prescott had different plans. The first sign of trouble came on a crisp October morning. Mason was teaching Hazel to rope fence posts when smoke began rising from the direction of the barn. Not the thin wisps of normal ranch work, but thick black columns that meant serious fire. "Stay here," Mason commanded, already running toward the flames. The barn doors stood wide open. Orange tongues licked at the hay stored in the loft. His prize horses whinnied in terror from their stalls. Without hesitation, Mason plunged into the smoke-filled structure. Buttercup came first. The gentle mare's eyes showed white with fear, but she trusted Mason enough to follow his lead through the choking haze. Then Thunder, his fastest stallion, fighting the rope but following survival instinct toward cleaner air. The roof timbers began groaning overhead. Sparks rained down like deadly snow. Mason's shirt caught fire as he led the last two horses to safety. His hands blistered from the heat, but all 6 animals escaped with their lives. The barn collapsed 20 minutes later in a shower of sparks and burning timber. 2 years of stored hay, expensive leather tack, tools passed down from his father, all of it reduced to ash and memory. Josie appeared at his side with wet cloths for his burns. "Thank God you're alive. Someone set this." Mason's voice carried grim certainty. "Doors don't open themselves." Jake Miller found proof an hour later. Boot prints in the soft earth near the barn's rear corner. The distinct heel mark of expensive Eastern-made boots. Only one man in Copper Falls wore footwear that fine. "Owen Prescott," Jake confirmed. "Saw him wearing those same boots at the general store yesterday." But knowing and proving remained different things entirely. Owen would have alibis. Witnesses who'd place him elsewhere during the fire. Men who owed him money or feared his influence would swear he'd been conducting legitimate business while Mason's barn burned. The community response surprised everyone. Neighbors appeared before the ashes cooled completely. They brought lumber, nails, and willing hands. Within days, a new barn began rising from the ruins of the old one. "Fire's a rancher's worst enemy," explained Tom Brady, a neighboring cattleman. "We stick together against common threats." The barn raising became a celebration of resilience. Women brought covered dishes. Children played games in the yard. Men worked from dawn until dusk, their hammers ringing like church bells across the valley. Hazel made herself useful carrying water and holding boards steady while grown men nailed them into place. Her serious concentration on each small task drew smiles from hardened cowboys who recognized true grit when they saw it. But the happiness couldn't last. Owen returned 3 days after the new barn's completion. This time he brought official-looking documents and 4 men wearing deputy badges. Their leader, a thin man with cold eyes, introduced himself as Federal Marshal William Kane. "Mr. Blackthorne, you're under arrest for theft of federal property." Mason's hands stilled on the fence post he'd been mending. "What property?" "This ranch, purchased with money stolen from the Territorial Bank of Helena 5 years ago." Marshal Kane produced a folded paper. "We have sworn statements placing you at the scene of the robbery." The accusations hit like physical blows. Bank robbery carried a hanging offense in Montana territory. Even association with stolen money could mean years in federal prison. "That's impossible." Josie stepped forward. "Mason's never robbed anyone." "Evidence suggests otherwise, ma'am." Kane's voice held bureaucratic indifference. "Stand aside while we execute this warrant." Owen Prescott emerged from behind the deputies like a spider revealing itself in its web. His smile carried the satisfaction of a man watching long-laid plans come to fruition. "Terrible business," Owen said with false sympathy. "Never would have suspected such a thing from a neighbor." Mason's tracking instincts finally saw the full picture. Owen hadn't simply wanted revenge for the public humiliation months ago. He'd been planning something far more elaborate, something that required legal documentation and corrupted federal officials. "You orchestrated this." Mason's voice carried deadly quiet certainty. "Careful with your accusations, Blackthorne. Wouldn't want to add slander to your growing list of crimes." The fake marshal produced shackles from his coat. "Hold out your hands." But as Kane reached for Mason's wrists, the rancher's sharp eyes caught something that made his blood freeze. A familiar face among Owen's hired men. Jake Morrison, a wanted outlaw whose picture had hung in the sheriff's office for 2 years. If Owen was using known criminals as fake federal deputies, then nothing about this arrest was legitimate. The warrants were forged. The robbery charges were fabricated. Owen was stealing the ranch through an elaborate confidence scheme. The realization came too late. Steel shackles clicked around Mason's wrists. Josie's desperate protests fell on deaf ears. Hazel began crying, not understanding why strangers were taking away her Uncle Mason. "Don't worry," Owen told the frightened family. "I'll make sure the ranch is properly managed while this situation resolves itself." The threat couldn't be clearer. Owen intended to claim the property while Mason rotted in a federal jail cell, helpless to protect the family he'd sworn to defend. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While Mason sat in the makeshift jail cell Owen's men had constructed in the old mining office, Josie searched through Samuel's belongings with desperate determination. Her late husband had been a careful man who saved every scrap of paper. Letters, receipts, newspaper clippings, all stored in a wooden box beneath their bed. She'd avoided looking through his things since his death, but desperation made her brave. The letter was dated 3 years ago. Samuel's careful handwriting described a conversation he'd overheard at the mining camp. Owen Prescott bragging to another man about easy money from a bank job down in Helena. The letter had been addressed to Samuel's brother in Colorado, but never sent. "He knew," Josie whispered to herself. Samuel knew Owen was involved in something criminal. She tucked the letter into her dress and rode hard to town. Sheriff Reynolds had been notably absent during Mason's arrest, but she found him at the saloon nursing a whiskey and looking troubled. "Sheriff, I need to speak with you." Reynolds glanced around nervously. "Can't help you, Mrs. Blackwood. Federal matter now." "Those weren't real federal marshals." Josie kept her voice low but urgent. "One of Owen's men is Jake Morrison. There's a wanted poster with his face in your own office." The sheriff's hand stilled on his glass. Jake Morrison had robbed 3 banks and killed 2 men. No legitimate federal operation would use him as a deputy. "You certain about this?" Josie showed him Samuel's letter. Reynolds read it twice, his expression growing darker with each word. "Your husband was a good man, honest as the day is long." The sheriff stood up with renewed purpose. If Sam wrote it down, it happened exactly like he said. Meanwhile, Mason used his own skills to gather information from his cell. The fake deputies were careless around their prisoner, assuming a shackled man posed no threat. Their conversations revealed the scope of Owen's scheme. The Helena bank robbery had netted $12,000 5 years ago. Owen had been the inside man, providing information about security and schedules. When the robbery went bad and one man died, Owen disappeared with his share of the money. He'd used the stolen funds to establish his trading post empire, slowly building wealth and respectability. But the silver deposits recently discovered on Mason's land represented far greater riches than a simple robbery could provide. "Boss wants the whole valley," Jake Morrison told another hired gun. "Silver vein runs clear to the river, worth more than we can count." Owen's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Frame Mason for the original robbery using forged evidence. Seize the ranch as stolen property. Mine the silver while appearing to act as a legitimate federal custodian. But elegance meant nothing if the foundation crumbled. Sheriff Reynolds arrived the next morning with the real territorial marshal and 6 legitimate deputies. The authentic lawman quickly identified the forgeries in Owen's documents. Jake Morrison tried to run, but didn't make it past the town limits. "You're under arrest for impersonating federal officers," Marshal Thompson told Owen's remaining men. "Drop your weapons and surrender peacefully." The fake deputies scattered like quail, abandoning Owen to face justice alone. Owen himself stood in Mason's kitchen when the real law arrived. He'd been inventorying the contents of the house, making lists of property to be confiscated. His expensive boots had tracked mud across Sarah's clean floors. "Owen Prescott, you're under arrest for bank robbery, fraud, and conspiracy." Marshal Thompson's voice carried the authority of genuine federal power. "This is absurd. I'm a respected businessman." "You're a thief and a murderer." The marshal produced genuine wanted posters. Jake Morrison confessed everything to save his neck, including your role in the Helena job. Owen's face went white as bleached bone. Morrison's testimony would hang him as surely as a judge's gavel. Mason walked free 10 minutes later, his shackles removed by apologetic federal deputies. The charges against him evaporated like morning mist under the heat of truth. Josie ran to him across the yard, her relief evident in every step. Hazel followed close behind, her face bright with joy at seeing her Uncle Mason freed from the bad men. "Thought I might lose you both," Mason said, gathering them close. "Never," Josie replied fiercely. "We're family now. Families stick together." Owen was led away in the same shackles he'd used on Mason. His trading post would be seized to pay restitution to the bank. His grand plans for silver mining would enrich territorial coffers instead of his private accounts. Jake Morrison's full confession revealed the extent of Owen's criminal network. 3 other robberies, 2 murdered witnesses, a web of corruption reaching into territorial government itself. The trial lasted a week. Owen Prescott was sentenced to hang for murder and robbery. His co-conspirators received various prison terms. Justice moved swiftly in Montana territory when the evidence was clear. 6 months later, Mason and Josie married in the little church at Copper Falls. Hazel served as flower girl, scattering rose petals from Sarah's restored garden. The whole community attended, their earlier doubts replaced by genuine affection for the unlikely family. Pastor Williams spoke of love emerging from loss, of families forged by choice rather than blood. His words rang true across the packed church as 3 people who'd found each other in darkness stepped together into light. Mason legally adopted Hazel that same afternoon. She signed the papers with careful concentration, then looked up at him with shining eyes. "Now I can call you Papa for real." "You always could, little one. The papers just make it official." They returned to their ranch as a complete family, bound by love, tested in fire, and strengthened by truth. The silver deposits proved even richer than Owen had suspected. But the real treasure was already theirs, sitting around the dinner table each evening, filling the house with laughter and hope. Some things were worth more than gold.